Okay, I'm going to be building a ITX chassis Ryzen 5 2400G system for my aunt, and I thought this would be a great opportunity to see just how fast I could build this thing. So we're going to record some footage and see how fast we can build it. I had originally planned to go over to New Angel's house and build this tonight, but I had a terrible time sleeping today and I just couldn't do it. So let's see what we can build. I think this is going to be a really fun build. I've never built a Mini-ITX case based machine before. This should be a lot of fun. Let's get a brief look at the components. We have the MSI B450i Gaming Plus AC. This has built-in wireless. It has a B450 chipset, and it should be just about perfect for what we need to do. The main reason for me picking this board over other boards is, namely, ASRock was the other choice I was considering, but ASRock didn't have support for this right here, which is a Crucial MX500 SATA-based SSD with 1 gig capacity. I run this exact same drive in my desktop machine, and you know what? For what I use it for, it's more than enough, and for what my aunt will use it for, this is going to be ridiculous. But her last machine, which was a little tiny Dell machine that she bought 2 years ago, the hard drive failed on it, and it had a Intel Pentium processor with a quad core, and this was a fairly modern machine, but even as a budget machine, I felt that her and my uncle, they got ripped off, and I wanted to build a much better machine at a lower price. So we have this motherboard, 1 terabyte SSD. We have a 8 gig kit here of Corsair Vengeance LXP. I run a similar kit in my machine that's higher clocked, but I was kind of surprised. I didn't know this kit wouldn't come without the cooler, and let me show you the cooler on my machine real briefly here. Oh man, that glare is terrible off my monitor. But it comes with this cooler, and I don't think it's going to need it because it'll only be clocked at 3000 megahertz. So this should be more than enough for this machine. Some people probably say, you know, for your aunt and uncle, this is probably overkill. But I really wanted to have the higher clocked RAM to get the best performance out of the Ryzen 5 2400G, which we have right here. 500 Masterwatt Lite. There are better power supplies out there, but for this build, this thing's going to be plenty. It was a good deal. I saved some money buying it, and it's gotten good reviews, and this should be perfect for this build. And we're going to be building this inside a Coolermaster Elite 1110, which may be the last of its kind. I think I ordered the last one off Amazon, and I'm not sure they're going to be for sale much longer. And I looked into a lot of Mini-ITX cases, and I think this one here is going to be exactly what I need to build in. I mean, I looked at some NZXT cases and some Fantex cases, and they weren't small enough. They weren't doing the things that I wanted, and I looked at even smaller cases than this, and then they were too small. This case at least gives you a little bit of expandability, so you can drop in a graphics card later if you wanted to into a build like this. That's definitely not the intention with this build. This machine will likely never have a discrete graphics card. We have just about everything here we need to build this machine, and we're going to get started. Okay, for the rest of this build, we're going to use my streaming setup, and I've just slightly modified the position of my desktop camera. It's a lot lower quality than my Pixel phone, but I don't have to hold it. So I just have this hanging from a cupboard directly above my desk, and I think this is going to give us a good perspective on this build. So the first thing we're going to do is use a box cutter. This is a box cutter that I got from work that I use at work. And we're going to use a proper box cutter to open this box. As you can tell, I may have some experience opening boxes with this thing. Although it definitely needs a new blade. It's not the best anymore. We're going to go ahead and remove this case. And unlike ATX builds that I built in the past, it really seems like I'm going to have plenty of room to build this tiny little thing on the desk. Now, from what I understand, this case should come with a fan. And I'm hoping that's all I'll need. I heard some reviews saying it was really noisy. And I read a bunch of stuff on it saying the fan that came with it is really noisy and that they swapped it for a Noctua or something. We'll see. We'll see how noisy it is. I grew up in the era of 286s where you could clearly hear hard drives ping through the machine. It's just a standard Coolermaster fan. I think it'll be plenty good enough for this build. So, first impressions, this thing is tiny. This is going to be a beastie little box for certain. So it looks like we have thumb screws on the back, but they're a little tight. I'm going to use my screwdriver kit and unscrew it. From the back. Things are a little mixed up. I just built this desk and rearranged this room, and I still haven't moved the boxes out from the desk. It's winter out, and we're about to get a really nasty snowstorm this weekend near Erie, Pennsylvania, which had that record snowfall last year. We have a package of screws right down here, and we will get those out of there. It looks like they're just twist tied in, and it looks like at the top I have 2 hard drive bays. And I'm sort of going to wing it. I'm going to read the instructional booklet, mount everything in here. Looks like the way we'll build this is we'll install all of the hardware first, and then the power supply will go in last. And I think this is a full ATX power supply, so this little mounting bracket I think comes off, and then I could just slide the whole power supply in. But I do know this power supply is supposed to fit in here one way or the other. I'm not sure if this is a Mini-ITX or not, but it's supposed to fit in this case. I used a Forbes guide as the basis for this machine. You know, that's not exactly, you know, you wouldn't think of Forbes when you think of building PC hardware and building personal computers. But, you know, Forbes has a lot of, I've noticed a lot of interesting articles come out of them, just technology. And they had this build guide for building a machine under $500, and this is a little more than $500 because I modified the specs. This is definitely a full ATX power supply. Not modular, but that may not be a problem. We'll wrap it up in there nice and tight and just make sure that the CPU has good airflow. So I'll probably mount all the hardware to the motherboard first, and then we'll slide it into the enclosure and screw it in. Yep, it does recommend removing the hard drive bays. Looks like mostly for installing graphics. And I hope this fan has a chassis plug-in. I'd rather have it plugged into the chassis and auto-regulating than just turned on via Molex connector, which I really wouldn't want to use. Oh my god, look how tiny this motherboard is. It's so tiny. Like, I opened this box up earlier this week and compared it to my ASRock X470 Taichi that's in my NZX machine right over here. And just the size difference. I mean, it's hard to comprehend when you've never seen an ITX case before. Oh, let's see. We're going to need that eventually. I think the rest of the stuff we'll just leave in here for now. So before I really get too far into installing all the hardware on the motherboard, we're going to put this back plate And we're going to go ahead and install it into the case first. And we'll get this installed. This is normally, like, in a modern day, like, I'm so used to, like, when I went to college in 2002, building cases and being afraid of cutting your hands in cases, and cases are just so much nicer than they used to be. And you can still get dirt cheap cases that you're going to cut yourself in, but when installing this, this is the only real part of the build that I ever get worried about cutting myself on. Because the case itself, they generally are just so well built and so well manufactured to avoid cutting the user. Now, if you want to take extra precautions, it would be highly recommended to wear a static discharge bracelet, which I am not going to do. I'm fairly well grounded here, and I'm not really worried about it. So, the first thing that we want to do is open up our processor box and install our processor. There we go. There's our processor with our shiny Ryzen 5 sticker. And this is the stock HSF heatsink fan. We're going to use this. I was half tempted to use the Wraith cooler off of mine, which I do not use, but I would just I'd probably end up turning off the RGB anyway. I imagine my aunt and uncle would not appreciate gratuitous amounts of RGB coming out of their computer center. And there is a pre-applied layer of thermal paste on here. And I'm actually going to use this initially because I'm not sure what I did with my Arctic Silver. So we've removed the processor. And we have the heatsink ready right here. So for those of you who have only built modern Intel machines that have the pins built into the socket, this is probably going to be a new experience because AMD processors still have the pins built into the processor, and as far as I'm concerned, it's a much easier way to go about installing the hardware. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to pull back the socket lever. We're going to take our processor and we're going to look on our processor for a dotted corner, and you can see it right next to my finger right there. And we're going to line that up with one of the edges on the motherboard, and this will just drop right into the socket when it's aligned correctly. And you'll just line it up and it'll just plop right down. There will be no resistance. You do not want to force these into the socket. And then all you do is put that down, clicks into place. Alright, so we're going to install the processor fan. And you can install this any direction that you want. But in my case, I'm going to have to remove this bracket. And this bracket is here because there are older style heat sinks available for AMD processors that you could clip down into these two holes right here. You just clip it right on there. So we're going to want to unscrew this. But underneath, we want to save this plate because we will need it. A little bit of resistance breaking those loose, but I'm still managing to do it with this tiny Stanley screwdriver set. And I see a lot of people build with these tiny Stanley screwdriver sets like this. I just picked it up at Walmart years ago, and they still make them. You can just go into your local Walmart and pick one up. The M.2 slot is underneath. So we're going to go ahead and build the rest of the machine now, and we'll install the M.2 last. Alright, so I think we're going to install the HSF, and I want to make sure I know where this is going to plug in. It looks like it's going to plug in up here. So I will just go ahead and mount it right there. Stock thermal grease and all. I know this is going to trigger people. I'll go ahead and turn this where I can see it better. The only thing that's kind of awkward about this new table I have and doing this right where I'm doing it is that the edge is right here and it's not exactly flat. the edge of the table, so it's sliding around in ways I don't like. That wasn't too bad. And then we'll plug in the fan into the CPU 1 connector. And there is a sysfan connector right next to it, and that's where I plan on plugging in the sysfan. I think that might be the only sysfan connector that it has. Now we'll install the RAM. Alright, we'll make sure that our slots are down. So this could be why the installation videos were telling me to install the RAM first, but I don't think it's... yeah, it'll clear. Huh. Yep, just slots right in. And when you're installing RAM, I always check it like this and make sure that the middle connector there lines up with the hole on the RAM slot. That way I don't end up trying to install it backwards, which it, you know, won't do. It doesn't like it when you try to do stuff like that. And then we're going to push the one connector, the one side down so it clicks into here, and then push the other side, which is much different than the old way of doing it where you wanted to get everything in even. Now we're going to make sure these are seated properly. I don't think I got the inside one in right. Yep, there we go. They're seated in there very securely. 8 gigs of RAM installed. Seems kind of low. Maybe some would argue it's not future-proof enough. I think it's fine. And if for some reason we needed to upgrade it in the future, we'll upgrade it in the future. I'm not really worried about it. Everything's in here nice and secure. We're going to turn the system around. It's all nice and tight. So this is where the M.2 is going to slot in. And we're just going to use the M.2 screw that comes with the drive itself. Now, I noticed most motherboards come with an M.2 screw, and I've always bought Crucial hard drives, but my friend bought a Kingston, or Crucial SSDs. My friend bought a Kingston SSD, and it also came with a screw, so I'm assuming that's fairly standard. With the Crucial, the big shiny sticker, which is, that's actually how they look now. They come with this big fancy sticker on the top, is actually the one that needs to be face up. What happens if you do it face down? I don't actually know. I don't think it would slot correctly in. So you push it in, and then you bend it down and screw it in. So we're going to get the screw out. Comes with 2 screws. I can't remember. You know, you only build your machine once if you're any good at it. So, remembering all these little details, like, oh, it came with 2 screws, because this is the same exact SSD, right down to the model number that I installed in my main system. And it's only SATA, it's not an NVMe. But, you know what? It's fast enough for me. I don't really see the advantage of having an NVMe. It loads fast enough because I'm coming from hard drives. So, and I have loaded Doom 2016 levels off of a hard drive, and I'm pretty pleased with how fast that it loads. Installed. All the main hardware is installed. This is going really smooth, really quick. Now we're going to move this into the chassis, and I'm going to see what we can do without taking the top off. But well, you know what? I am going to take the top off. I'm going to take the SSD out of my, or the hard drive out of my aunt's machine for copying the data over eventually, but I'm not going to do that for this video. Probably won't even bother mounting it. I'll just leave it all open and connect it and get the data I need off of it. It's a very damaged Seagate Maximus drive, and they've only had the machine 2 years, but the company that they bought it from, they my aunt wanted them to install Trend antivirus, and I just think it was constantly using the hard drive, because once I got it uninstalled, the system was somewhat responsive, but the damage was already done. I used the diagnostic tools of the Dell computer, and it let me know that the hard drive was in pre-failure. So that's why we're building this whole new machine with a much better specification. It's going to last my aunt and uncle a lot longer. Okay, so I'm going to have to install some post. I don't think it's going to screw right into the chassis. Yep, there's posts that come with this. I don't think I'm going to need that many. Like maybe 4? Yeah, only 4 posts. That's neat. This is neat. This is a cool experience for me. So I'm hoping that this comes with a post installer in here somewhere. It looks like it has one. Yep. And I wish I would have had a post installer when I was younger doing builds like this. It comes with zip ties for organizing the wiring. We may use those. We'll find out once we get the power supply in here. Hopefully I won't regret buying a non-modular power supply. I'm sure if this is your first time building a computer, I would not recommend building in a chassis this small. And if you have big fingers and hands and such, you definitely wouldn't want to. So this is a post installer, and it has a socket on one side to stick the post into, right there. And then it has a Phillips head screwdriver head on the other side. And I'm hoping that the holes are pre-threaded. They look pre-threaded, and if it's pre-threaded, I'm just going to screw it by hand until it goes in part of the way, and I'll screw it the rest of the way in with the screwdriver. And this is the phase where we'll really see if installing the I/O shield first was a good idea or not. I guess the simple thing about doing this ITX build is just how everything's just downsized. So like on an ATX build, like what I did, I'm pretty sure I had 8 or 9 different post screws I had to install. And I only have 4 here, because everything's smaller and I don't need all those additional posts. So the SSD is just going to hide beneath there. And, oh, I think it's a little loose. I don't think I screwed that screw in tight enough. Okay, so I'm tapping on my SSD and I'm not hearing it wobble around, so that means I have the screw down far enough. And you don't want to over screw it because you could crack some PCB or something. You definitely don't want that. And now what I'm doing now is I'm standing at the angle that you would see on the camera, and I'm gonna slide everything into the I/O shield and make sure that all the posts are lined up. Not a lot of resistance. It looks like this is going to be easy. Okay, so we got that done. So now I just need the correct screws to screw into the motherboard. And I'm going to reference the manual real quick to make sure I'm grabbing the correct screws. I guess this is the one thing I'm going to say I don't like about the Elite, is that the screws aren't separated. There's 2 into their own little baggies, because that would make it a little bit, that would make it a lot easier. And these little rubber feet, they're probably for mounting a 3.5-inch hard drive to that mounting bracket that we removed. That way it absorbs the vibrations that the hard drive would make, because it is a spinning platter. What I like to do when I'm building is install the hardest screws first, which means the rear ones. That way the front screws should align correctly with no problem. So I'm not going to tighten it all the way in. Just going to push it until the screw's aligned. And do the other rear one, which that doesn't seem to be given as much resistance as that first one. Okay, and then I imagine the front ones will go in fairly easy too. All my builds have always been either ATX or micro ATX, in some combination of mid tower or full tower. I'm a bit in awe doing this and looking at everything, at how smooth this is all going and how easy this is. So I'm gonna look at the chassis fan first, since that's the one directly in front of me. Looks like I can remove this Molex converter, which is good. I just, you know, the less stuff I can have in here, the better. And I could just plug this straight into the motherboard and let the motherboard regulate it and control it. And this is only a 3-pin header, so I don't know if it's going to report the RPM back to the motherboard. Normally the 4-pin headers will do that. You know, there's a lot of extra. I might wrap this back up in that zip tie. Might as well tidy it up as we're building, since this is such a simple build. I guess the thing that I'm most worried about with this build long term at my aunt's house is going to be dust accumulation. There's not really... I think there is a front dust filter, so as long as I have it set to push-pull, you know, I'll show them how to take the front cover off. And okay, so this wire goes down here, and we could secure that to the bottom at one of these ties. We're going to stick a tie underneath here, and I'm going to go ahead and grab the processor. I'll try it from the back. I can't get it to feed through here. That's the problem with an all-black case build in a not so well lit room. Stick my finger there. I can keep it. There we go. Stick your finger underneath it. There's your solution to make it stay in the case where we want it. The main reason I'm doing this is I don't want this to interfere with the RAM. This RAM is going to be overclocked. And I'm now very glad that I didn't get the Corsair cooler that you can get with them. Although I did see that some people just sell them on eBay by themselves, because I guess they're not going to use them in their build. And we have that secured nice and tight to the bottom of the chassis where it's not going to rattle around. And I don't have a pair of cutters on me, but I will cut this later. I don't think I can cut this with my box cutter. This box cutter has like a sawed edge on it. I don't really think you can see it on the camera. There you go, it focused. Focus back, alright. And I can just, oh, super easy. Cut that right off, nice and short. Next thing that we'll want to do is install the actual power supply unit. So I'm going to unwrap it from this protective case, which looks very easy. I'm just going to pull back this plastic. And done. I could probably take out this mount, but it doesn't look like I need to. I mean, I could unscrew the mount back here, but if I could just install it like this, why not? Although I think it would probably pull cleaner air in this configuration. So let's take a look here at power supply installation. Yeah, there's definitely enough room that you could install a small radiator like what I have. I have an NZXT X31. You could take that fan out and install a radiator. That's what it's showing. Installing the power supply. Yep, it's telling me to install it the opposite direction that I have it. Although it looks like it would have no problem being installed like this. Yeah, I would rather it got its air from the chassis fan that's going to be dust filtered. For sure. It's like reading a newspaper. And it shows, like, removing the bracket, which I don't think is necessary, really. Not for this particular build, not that since I removed the top. So we're going to install this with the fan facing downward, which is, according to the manual, the correct way to install it. And see how I'm just going to keep all of these cables up here, and we're going to plug them in one at a time. And it looks like I'm going to have plenty of room to reach everything. Yeah, this ain't going to be bad at all. I'm probably going to mount this around the main ATX power, around the side right here. You get screws with everything. You should always have extra PC screws if you built PCs for long enough. And we're going to just screw these in. It looks like there are several places I could screw it. Should only really need 4 if this is done right. We could go more if you wanted to, if it makes you feel better. But yeah, it looks like this bracket was designed that you could install the power supply whatever direction you wanted to. So it could be your preference. I definitely wouldn't, since there's no dust filter on it, I definitely want it pulling from inside the case. So now comes the fun part. We're going to install the wiring, and I think I'm going to take my hat off for this. I'm like, why are you wearing your headphones for this? Well, I'm literally using my headphones right now as a hairband to keep my hair tied back up because I am in serious need of a haircut. We're going to look at all of our chassis inputs and wire those up. And hopefully, I wish I would have realized this before I installed the power supply. We're going to back up. We're going to take the power supply out. And we'll be right back. See, you can see even someone who's as experienced as I am can still goof up a build. So one of the things I'm going to test with this machine once it's built is how well does it run RimWorld? I'm kind of curious. My mom's laptop, which was a Ryzen 7, I think it was a 2200G, didn't actually do as well as I expected. I was pretty let down. I wouldn't think a game like RimWorld would require a decent graphics chip or discrete graphics, but seeing how it ran on her laptop really made me wonder if I should change my mind on that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to look at all the headers. Let's separate them. So we have front I/O for audio, in case you want to plug in a set of headphones, and then we have multiple USB cables that can be plugged in. Flip these on top. Diagram here that we can follow to tell us where this stuff is going to be. Install the USB, and the USB header is by the RAM, and then there's an additional USB header on here. So I've got two USB connectors right here, and the way it looks like it's going to be easiest to install them on this motherboard configuration is to install the small one here underneath the RAM and then the big one on top right here. So we'll do the small one first and then the big one, which is a mistake that I just made because I didn't know where it was going. I really don't like the close proximity to the RAM, but you know, things are going to be tight in a build like this. And here comes the favorite part of every PC build, which is installing your power header. These are the switches that make your hard drive lights blink if you have them. Soft reset switch if you just want to press a button to reset, you know, if you have it. That's actually not as common anymore. And we have hard drive LED, and we have the power switch. And like, you can build a machine and everything will be set up right, but if you put this switch in the wrong place, then it's not going to power on. There's normally like a diagram, and it'll tell you where to put it and the order they need to put it. I have to admit, Gigabyte has the best setup. They have like a little plastic thing that you just pop them in, then you pop that whole plastic thing in, and it's super easy. And I don't know, maybe it's a patented thing that only Gigabyte has, but I don't know if, you know, I wish other manufacturers had it. Okay, so we're going to have to go to JPF connector 1, which looks like it's right here. Oh, you know, now that I look at this, I should remove the front panel and run this stuff behind the front panel. It's probably a smarter idea for airflow. It just popped out. We're going to rerun the USB around like this. And then what I'll do is I'm going to cable tie it right here on the outside edge, because that cable tie is not on the inside. There we go. That'll keep things a little more organized in the case. The thing is like when you've built in a case before, you know, you basically know all the tricks and tips of cable management and where you want to put the cables. Like when I built in the NZXT S340 Elite that my main rig is in, I had built in that case. I'd helped my friend Darius build in that case, and he'd purchased it, and I fell in love with that case. I'm like, it was the easiest case I'd ever built in. Back to the power header. Rotate this so I can see this in line with the diagram. What we'll do is we'll unscrew this from the top, so these won't come in from the bottom, but we'll run them all along the bottom, and then we'll zip tie the whole lot of them once they're installed correctly. Yeah, the rest of the build goes real smooth until you get to this part, and it's like, why did I ever get into building PCs? I'm pretty sure we have all of that in correctly, and I likely won't zip tie this permanently into place until testing whether it powers on or not, which will be the next phase of this, will be power supply installation. So this is where things are going to get tricky. Like, how do I want to go about? I probably want to install as much of the power supply components as I can before. There's just too much power supply for this computer. Really, only thing I'm going to need off the power supply are these two cables, and the rest of it's going to get wrapped up. I'm going to take this wad of wires and the stuff I don't need, which is pretty much all of it, and I'm going to button that in as tight as I possibly can to the power supply, and then we'll find a place in the chassis. Might need another zip tie to zip tie that away from the heatsink fan. We basically got our big wad of wires here on this power supply. It was cheap. Price was more of a concern than the practicality. You know, ideally I would have used a EVGA modular or Corsair modular to do this project. What I want to do is figure out how I'm going to run the ATX power. So I'm going to set this right here to the side like this. So both of these I'm probably going to bring in, oh no, I'm going to bring in my RJTX power, and I got to calculate how I want to do this. So when I get it out, I'm probably going to bring it into the big part on the right here and then take it down the lower port below the fan. I want to make sure the connector is going to come out in such a way that it'll plug in there correctly. This is going to require some coercion. I'm going to have to force it a little bit and bend it. Wish they would stop making these two separate connectors that don't need to go together. Just put it all together as a solid connector. That, oh, that's tricky. I got it in there. ATX power is in there, and it's very much, this is going to very much keep it out of the way of the fan as long as I zip tie it out of the way so the fan has uninterrupted airflow. This is all working like it's going to be really good from an airflow standpoint. I'm going to plug this power supply in, and we're going to find out if this PC powers on. All the power is plugged in, so before, this isn't going to be the permanent location of this cable, but I'm going to make sure it powers on first. We're going to plug in the power. Make sure that the on switch is activated on the power supply. And we're going to try to power this on. And we got to figure out where the power button's at. How do you turn this thing on? Oh, you hit the Coolermaster logo. Alright, we got power. I got LEDs. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cable manage the power supply cables and all that to the bottom of the chassis. And I might reuse some of these zip ties to perform double duty. Most people wouldn't do that, but I sure as heck would. Okay, so we're going to unplug this. We're start working on it. Press the power button to discharge it. Nothing to discharge. First, cable manage these. Attach them to the bottom of the chassis so they're out of the way. I don't really like this though. Like, the front's going to be used to filter dust, but it's not a proper dust filter that you just pop out and clean and put back into place. It's a disappointing find, but I mean, this case was about $50, so I guess I shouldn't be terribly surprised. It's our trick of sticking our finger under here. Yeah, that's way easier. Put Starting to snow outside. It's really wet. It's supposed to get really cold though. It's going to be like -3 degrees Fahrenheit outside. What has this video been going? About an hour. Got pretty far in an hour. We had first power in less than an hour. Well, I did have video cuts, so I guess I have to count those too. Yeah, so if you want to build your first machine in Mini-ITX, I don't recommend that at all. I would build like a micro ATX. Cut, please. Yeah, having a good pair of cutters would be ideal to using this stupid sawtooth, this dull sawtooth blade that I'm using. There we go. Because you could end up like dinging a cable or something. So we're not going to finish securing that yet. We're going to go ahead and put this bad boy in here. We'll figure out how to mount this CPU power once we get this all in here. Okay, so if I'm lucky, I can stuff this power, yep, right on top of the power supply. And yeah, I think we're gonna successfully keep all this airflow moving. So I'm gonna go ahead and install the power supply correctly again with the fan facing down, and then I'm going to stuff those cables on top. I can see where people really complain now, like there definitely needs to be some real innovation in ITX form factors, but man, that also seems to defeat at least some of its purpose of building small machines that are just physically small and yet powerful like this. I wish I had a way to secure this with a wire up here and stuff it down like that. I'll have to look at the case, but it should be fine like that. Let's see if we can. We're gonna run that power like that. We'll let the fan hold it in place. And I don't know if I'm gonna reach. I'm trying to do an estimate here without plugging it in. Alright, I'll feed this in through the bottom. Yeah, I don't think I can bring it over to the side. I'm going to have to feed this in through the top and then through the bottom. Or I could go in sideways. Oh, sideways might be perfect. Yep, I think sideways is going to be perfect for that. Got to make sure that all the mounting holes for the front are going to clear the wires, and it looks like they're going to. It's just going to require a little finesse. I'll just go ahead and set the case up right. Oh my god, it's so tiny. This case is so tiny. Yeah, it's designed to pull forward from the front, so... Yeah! That clicked in there. Nice. Yeah, so definitely if you want to set out on a project like this, or if you use my parts list, I would highly recommend that you have additional zip ties. Alright, so it's pretty much done. I'm definitely going to get some different footage here. So things are a little tight in here, but I have unobstructed air going to the power supply and the heatsink fan, and the RAM's about as good as it can get. Everything is really tight. I mean, this, it looks like it's in a way, but it doesn't obstruct the fan and the airflow at all. I ran the ATX power along the bottom here. Power supply is secured. We're going to stuff these cables right on top. And on the side here, we'll take a look down. I have everything screwed along the bottom, and it's mostly out of the way. It's a tight fit. I would definitely just go modular. I regret not buying a modular EVGA for this build, or Corsair, something high quality. I mean, Coolermaster doesn't make... I mean, you could get I'm sure Coolermaster sells modulars. So, yeah, it seems like you could definitely try to get a graphics card in here. But that's not the purpose of this particular build. So, we're going to go ahead and put the top back on it. And we're going to call this a complete build. Oh, geez. What did I drop? Oh. I have a big thing of pretzels like that over there. In my couch that's pulling double duty as a table right now. I don't think the airflow out is going to be as... It should have plenty of airflow to move out on the sides, but not the top, the way I have it configured. There's definitely better ways we could do it. But it looks like that'll keep the power supply cables from causing trouble. Man, this is a sweet little PC so far. And we're definitely going to plug that into my capture card and get some footage of getting it set up to run and everything. Alright. Not bad for my first ITX build. Not great. I'm extremely upset at myself for not spending the extra $25 to buy an EVGA power supply. That would have been... Having a modular power supply would have been paramount to increasing the airflow. Or I could have gone smaller and gotten less connectors. A lot of those connectors are just never going to be used. All done. Okay. So the next thing that we'll want to do is we'll set it up for capture. Oh God. I did forget something. Shit!